Brought to you by Moonbeam Multimedia.
This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning.
Hi.
Hey,
Hey there.
how have you been?
We are back in winter following fake spring in Ohio. It's in like the 30s and 20s.
I'm pretty sure I can go back to last year at this time and listen to the exact same
And we're
sequence.
doing the exact same roundabout.
I think we also probably went through the exact same illnesses at this point.
Yeah.
Last year.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. The
Everybody we
attendance-
know is ill. Everybody.
Yeah.
Like, teachers especially are getting hard hit right now, but like everyone else just randomly ill. There's
Our
a
attendance
stomach
in school
thing.
was so bad.
I know. There's a stomach thing going around. There's
flu.
a flu thing going
Yep.
around. There's COVID, obviously.
Bronchitis.
Yeah.
I know
So-
like 3 people right now have pneumonia. Like it's
My
a
gosh.
good time.
Take care of yourselves. Wash your hands.
Yeah.
Take your vitamin C.
Why don't we say that more often?
Also, touch some grass. Like, get out of your house.
Ooh, I don't know about that part.
You don't want to.
There might be people outside. I don't know. You might
Well,
be safer inside away from
That's
everyone.
true. That's true. Before we get into the topic this week, just want to remind you to go ahead and sign up for the 16 to 1 podcast email newsletter. That's where you can get the latest updates, episode announcements, resources, workshop offerings from Moonbeam Multimedia. That is us. And then also, if there's a story in your local educational community that you would like us to cover on 16 to 1, we're always looking for compelling stories, whatever's happening in your community, what's working, what's not working, what you'd like us to know about in your school, in your town, in your whatever it is, in your community of learning.
Yeah.
Get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you.
How'd you find this topic?
I was reading about some of the protections that are being rolled back for minorities and women
Okay.
and all kinds of things in this country right now.
Are those DEI things that I keep hearing
those
about?
DEI things that you keep hearing about. And I was reading about the longer context of history bending toward better civil rights.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, man, it's crazy how we've been having some of these same arguments for hundreds of years. But at the same time, we're also pretty new to certain kinds of equality or certain institutionalized approaches toward equality. And so anyway, I was just digging around in some of that stuff, and I was looking to history for some inspiration, and I came across this story of women 100 years ago who were fighting for the same kinds of things that women today are still fighting for around the world. So yeah. So we're talking about the Steamboat ladies today. So I'm going to set the scene a little bit. We're in the late 1800s, and we're in the UK. Women in the UK have been fighting for access to higher education for quite a while at this point, and they've had some uneven success there. They still face all kinds of restrictions that prevent them from fully participating in university life, and especially from obtaining degrees. Most of these places aren't actually granting degrees to women, even if they are admitting them to the universities. All of this is happening against a broader backdrop of women's suffrage, which is going on in the UK and around the world. There are organizations like the National Union of Women Suffrage Societies and the Women's Social and Political Union. They would do things like lead protests, hunger strikes, other kinds of demonstrations. Sometimes they would attack property to make their point. They would introduce varying degrees of social disruption for the purpose of pressuring governments to enfranchise women.
Sure. If you watch Mary Poppins, you see a little bit of it.
This is so. As I was reading this, I was like, man, I
Votes
really.
for women.
Yes, votes for women. I was so raised on Mary Poppins. Like, Mary Poppins is actually, it is my image of women's suffrage at this time. Like,
I
at
would
this
say
time.
historically,
This is what I think of when I think of the suffrage movement. I think of votes for women and Mary Poppins. Anyway. It does have this kind of political thing going on in the background that you forget about.
It
you
really
sort of
does.
forget about it because of all of the fantastical bottomless bag of magic stuff.
Right.
But
And
it is
then
a political.
on the side is like, the women out there.
Yeah. And there's some social commentary about
Tuppence.
chimney sweeps, and it's just the whole thing. Anyway.
And a bird lady.
Yes.
gosh.
You can feed the birds for tuppence a bag.
Oh, man.
So
We should watch
anyway,
that.
yeah.
That should come back up. I think we're about due.
We're going to do a 16-to-1 rewatch of Mary Poppins.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's kind of the world we're in, though. That the Mary Poppins world.
Yeah.
Put yourself in those shoes.
But they're at like the high end of it.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I meant like financially, they're at the upper end of
well,
the
I mean,
world.
yeah, she's like a banker's wife, right?
Yeah, so like they've got, yeah, I mean, they've hired a maid and they've hired Mary.
For sure. I would say that the story of suffrage is uneven in exactly this way. And even those two women's groups that I named, National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies and then the Women's Social and Political Union, were at somewhat opposite ends of the political pressure spectrum. One was more like, it's for women, wear the pins in the... And the other was like, we're going to light crap on fire until you listen to us.
You're right.
So...
everyone has a seat at the table.
Well, yes. And every time I read and study more about suffrage movements, I mean, we saw that musical Suffs. It's the same thing, just repeated across history.
Whatever the decade, copy paste.
But this is the conflict. Well, when everybody agrees that change needs to happen, when everybody's on the same kind of side, there's still, in progressive political movements, often this conflict. How do we accomplish this change? Do we slow burn it and just hope we can drag people along one at a time, one vote at a time, the slow work of blah, 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 blah? Or do we cause this flashpoint?
That's exactly the story told in Suffs.
Yeah.
The show.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's like the old guard, and they're like
the new
slow and steady
whippersnappers.
And then the new ones are like, actually, let's just light this effigy on fire.
Yeah. Which side of this? This is a fun personality test. Which side of this conflict would you be on?
On the slow and steady.
And which side would I be on?
You are the blow it up on the spot.
This is why we make good co-hosts.
Chelsea's nickname in a group chat is Flashbang.
And yours is
think
Harmony.
That's
Harmony and Flashbang.
That's us as people.
Which I think is great. Anyway, that's the suffrage context against which this is all taking place.
True.
We have some women having, at this point in our story, which is, again, the late 1800s, we have some local voting rights have already been won for women. There's this Local Government Act in 1894. This entitles property-owning women in the UK to vote in local elections, serve on school boards, and fulfill other kinds of governmental service, like poor boards.
So it's privileged
access. Yeah, well, almost all of this is. Yeah, I mean,
just if you're a property-owning woman at the time.
Yeah, congratulations if you do happen to be a property-owning woman.
You are of some
now
kind of,
you can have some say in what happens to that property. Okay, so when you think of schools in the UK at this time, what schools do you think of?
Just Oxford.
Just Oxford?
Oxbridge,
Oxford and Cambridge is what I... Yeah, okay, because they go back hundreds of
Yeah, I just don't even think about Cambridge, but I should.
So, neither Oxford nor Cambridge became the first UK university to award degrees to women. That honor goes to the University of London, which started awarding degrees to women in 1878.
Way to go.
Yeah. Other universities, including Oxford and Cambridge, allowed women to be admitted, and many of them created women's colleges at this time so that they could, have some separate but equal, if you will.
Okay.
So they created these women's colleges, and they would allow women to come and attend lectures and sit for exams, but they would not award degrees. But of course, they would take their money. But
that's the part.
Not give them the thing that is sort of the point.
So the women paid for this opportunity.
Yes.
And received nothing on paper for it.
They received the pat on the back of the personal enrichment of having done the education.
What a time.
And no degree.
I'm sure that's all they wanted.
There's a bit of background for this Steamboat Ladies story. And I promise we're going to tell you what Steamboat Ladies actually are. Here's the background that's relevant. Oxford, Cambridge, and Trinity College in Dublin had been doing this thing as far back as the early 1500s, but they think that probably it was going on before that. But that's just where they found it kind of in the rules.
Okay.
They'd been doing this thing where they would confer these ad eundem degrees. I'm probably not saying that right, because Latin was never my forte. But ad eundem degrees to people through this process known as incorporation.
Okay.
It's this process where you make somebody a member of your university body by giving them the same degree or status that they attain at their home university.
Okay.
And I'll actually link to it. There's this really interesting, the Bodleian Libraries, University of Oxford, has this article on incorporation, and I'll link to it in the show notes, because I'd never heard of this before.
Yeah,
but
I hadn't either.
it comes from this sense of, when you get a degree, when you study in a university, you're taking part in this grander republic of letters. You're a member of a larger body that is bigger than any one institution.
Okay.
And that is a member of
So
which
we're all in this together.
Right. We're
Clap,
all in
clap,
this
clap.
together.
Yep.
So if you've gone through this work of doing degree stuff at one university, then this other university will be like, well, we recognize that work and we will
Also confer.
Yeah. So now we're in 1904. This is where the Steamboat ladies finally become relevant. Trinity College in Dublin starts to admit female students, but it doesn't have separate women's colleges like its counterparts at Oxford and Cambridge. So Trinity women get Trinity degrees, but I did find it interesting that they still weren't permitted to use campus housing.
Yeah.
And they had to leave campus by 6 p.m., which was a policy that continued into the 1960s.
Okay, then.
So once again, not that long ago but still, we could get degrees. So we're making progress. This is a little bit of a surprising change for Trinity at the time, right? Because there's some...
Yeah, their provost up until 1904 had basically said, over my dead body, would women be able to attend Trinity? And then a few months later, a new provost took over because guess what happened?
He died?
He died. And over his dead body did the women march. And so the new provost was like, yeah.
Bet.
Yeah, the new provost was like, okay, ladies. He had a let's get in formation moment like Beyonce, and they started to attend. So the other interesting thing about this, other than the fact that this provost was like over my dead body and then drops dead. So many Irish women, though, had been forced to attend Oxford and Cambridge since Trinity would not allow them to even study there.
Oh.
And so Trinity was like, this will be a way to bring back the Irish women to Trinity to attend school there.
So Trinity had been exporting women to
Yes.
Oxbridge where they could not get degrees.
Right.
Okay.
And then they tried to open this up as like a kind of like a
I should say Ireland had been, not Trinity, but
Yeah.
also Trinity. Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
So then they thought that mostly this would just bring back the Irish women to go to school there. What they didn't expect were the Steamboat ladies.
The women actually care about their education? Go figure.
So yeah, that's how we get the Steamboat ladies, is their attempt to bring back the Irish students to Trinity actually opened the doors for all kinds of women to jump on a steamboat, cross the river, go to Trinity,
Yeah.
and get their degree.
This group of women, the Steamboat ladies, it's this group of more than 700 women who traveled to Dublin by steam ferry
Yep.
to receive, for these between 1904 and 1907, to receive these ad eundem degrees from Trinity College in Dublin. They were headmistresses, educators, academics, trailblazers, social reformers, suffragists. We'll talk about a few of them. But they would cross the Irish Sea by steam ferry to receive degrees after years of study and successfully completing their exams from Cambridge or Oxford, and they would get degrees at Trinity.
I can't imagine going to school, doing all of this, and not getting the thing that actually supports what's next for you. Like,
Yeah.
for these women, this degree, the actual paper of it meant something, right? There was something next for them. So the Trinity News, which is the student newspaper of Trinity College, had this great article about the Steamboat ladies that I've listed in the show notes. So the article went on to include a quote from a emeritus fellow and a historian, Susan Parks. Quote, they took one day off, they came on the overnight steamboat, stayed one night in Dublin, got their degrees the next day, and went back the following night, end quote. So they really did. They were in and out, many of
Wow.
them, got that paper, and bounced. So these Steamboat ladies, Trinity's pretty proud of this moment of history because it also helped push their own attempt to gender equality. And like I said earlier, they were pretty surprised that it brought in even non-Irish students to do this because they really didn't anticipate this, just to kind of open the door for the Irish woman. So something worth mentioning about Trinity today is that women make up the majority of their student population, but the female chair positions are only filled at a 26%, which is really interesting. Do you want to hear about a few of the ladies?
I would love to.
These women were teachers, headmistresses, professors, and educators. They were specialists in genetics, geologists, magistrates. There were British members of parliament. They were mathematicians, suffragists, archaeologists, politicians, all kinds of things.
They were very cool.
These are cool ladies. Okay.
I want to hear about Eleanor Rathbone. She's my favorite.
Yeah. My first note about her is that she had horrible handwriting, and I think that's great. I, too, have horrible handwriting.
Okay.
I appreciate that about her.
So if you're worried that your handwriting is going to keep you from being a world-renowned social reformer,
the bad news is you just have to read everything to a typist. The good news is you can keep your handwriting. Okay.
Bad news is you have to find a typist.
Eleanor was a staunch supporter of women's rights. She declared herself as, quote, 100% feminist.
Okay.
She was a writer, a member of parliament.
What if she'd been like, I'm 97% feminist?
Right.
Okay.
She was a member of parliament where she was elected as an independent. There's an article about her that I shared in the show notes from The Guardian, and it said, quote, she campaigned for money for war widows, against slum housing and the causalization of dock labor. She helped Spanish refugees who had fought Franco and Jews escaping Hitler.
Wow.
Eleanor Rathbone was well respected by Winston Churchill, who spent a lot of time trying to get her to accept positions, opportunities, awards, etc., and she normally always refused. One of the pieces I was reading basically was arguing that, like, Margaret Thatcher kind of gets the win for, like, most important woman of, the UK, and everyone is basically, like, actually, up until Thatcher, it was Rathbone. And then,
Wouldn't it suck to be supplanted, if you're Rathbone, to be supplanted by Margaret Thatcher as, like, the most influential
kind of, yeah.
I mean, if you look at their politics,
I feel like Rathbone would be like, I'm good. She was so much like I just do the right thing because it's what's right. So she was from a pretty affluent family, and she worked with her dad a lot, actually, to help investigate concerns of living in Liverpool. And so they would, like, investigate the industrial complex and, like, social things going on and try to make lives better for those people in Liverpool.
I heard that I was reading her Wikipedia article, and they had a family motto, which was, what ought to be done can be done.
Yeah.
I kind of liked that. I wanted it on a t-shirt or something.
Yeah, I know.
Just get to work.
And, like, at the time, to be working with your father in this kind of work would not have been very common.
One of the other things that she did, I found from her little biography, she actually started a school of social science, University of Liverpool. She ended up lecturing in public administration.
Jeez, so cool.
She's just all over the place. She's doing all kinds of things. So.
Yeah. Probably her most enduring legacy is her support for women receiving state benefits after becoming mothers. So she wanted to support women for their domestic labor, but she also didn't want to make it so that women were as dependent on their husbands. So she wanted to support them in having some separation if it was needed, but also just to reward them for all their hard work. Unfortunately, Rathbone died in January of 1946, and so she never lived to see the result of that hard work. The Family Allowance Act of 1945 was passed in June of 1945, but it didn't go into effect until August of 46. But she did all the work to get it there.
Wow.
That amount paid per family per child has changed over time, clearly. It started as 5 shillings per week for each child, other than the oldest. But later this sum was increased, and in 1975 it expanded to include the first child as well.
They're like, you only get...
If you have an only child, sorry, no money.
Only
if
bonus,
you have 2, yeah.
Only bonus kids get money? Okay.
So, last couple of things here about Eleanor Rathbone. She turned down a damehood.
Oh.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
She didn't suffer fools. She did not play these games. She did not...
She just, like, not fond of the political regime at the time?
She was just like, I'm busy doing other things. I told you, she kept turning down Churchill.
I'm busy.
She turned down Churchill on, like, all this stuff. Like, he was always calling her up to be like, let's do... And she was like, I'm doing
It sounds like she wanted to work and not be a figurehead.
Yes. So one thing worth mentioning, she spent her entire life with a Scottish social worker named Elizabeth McAdam. They bought multiple homes together.
Oh, is this one of those things where the history books call
roommates?
Them, yeah,
100%.
History has decided they're roommates.
Yeah, they were
fast friends.
They were quoted as being, quote, life partners. So,
okay,
just a little bit about Eleanor Rathbone. She probably deserves an entire episode, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So another woman I wanted to mention really quickly.
Another steamboat lady.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is Margaret Hills. She studied at Oxford. She moved to Yorkshire and got involved with the Union of Women's Suffrage. Margaret Hills's plan was to be a teacher. And then she decided she'd rather not, and she was going to work for the cause instead. She was an incredible public speaker. She was sent out all the time on their, as they called them, vanning cruise, like a caravan event, where she would be sent out to speak to help women earn the right to vote and to speak about workplace discrimination and all of those types of things that women were experiencing at the time. Hills and the women that she was working with during this caused so much attention that Winston Churchill called her and these women dangerous women. She went on to be elected to multiple district and county councils where she helped support housing concerns in communities. And so here's another woman that Churchill was like, oh dear, someone else to keep an eye on.
This reminds me of Inez Milholland.
Yes, that's exactly kind of the...
Inez Milholland is, we learned about her in Suffs, but she's kind of an American who's doing a very similar. She goes on a speaking circuit for the cause of suffrage in the U.S., women's suffrage.
Lots of these women did this kind of thing, right? These Steamboat ladies went on to do really incredible things. Like one of them I was reading about was like a leading geneticist at the time. All kinds of interesting things. Multiple dames in the list. Really incredible women who were willing to do this.
I am inspired by these women who did all the work and made sure that they got the degree that they deserved at the end of the day.
They earned, yeah. When did Oxford and Cambridge get it together?
It took quite a while. They could get these degrees from Trinity until 1907, and I guess some loophole was closed with those special like incorporation degrees, so that women couldn't come and get them anymore. And it took Oxford until 1920 and Cambridge until 1948
Dear Lord.
To award full degrees to women. But the Steamboat ladies blazed the trail. Are we ready for fill in the blank?
Okay, this is the part of the show where we ask you a question. You write us at hello@16to1.com with your answer. You want to take us through last episode's question?
Oh, sure, I would love to. It was a question about how we get the name for February, which was the month given its name due to an ancient tradition called Februa, which was the Roman festival of what?
People being ritually washed. It was a cleansing.
Oh.
Time to get right for
They're
spring.
Like, everybody's stanky.
It's been a long winter.
Okay. Cleansing. Ritual cleansing festival.
Yeah, really normal.
Oh, do we have to have a festival for that, really?
Back then, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's concerning.
Well, that's why so many people got married in the spring, was because you'd be cleaner because you normally showered. And then they would have you carry all the like a flower bouquet so you didn't smell as bad. So the flowers would mask how you smelled.
Because you'd just done the Februa.
The Februa, and you were 2 months off of your last bath.
Okay.
Time to get married.
That's gross.
All right.
What is this week's question?
This episode's question is, an alumnus of both Oxford and Trinity, this famous author and playwright was born to a father who was an acclaimed doctor who was knighted for his service, and to a poet mother who was closely associated with the Young Irelander Rebellion of 1848. Who is this well-known son? You didn't know this one.
I did not know this one.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I've been doing Irish on Duolingo for like a year now. Why don't I know about the Young Irelander Rebellion?
Because you're too busy learning how to ask for a red shirt.
No, I think coffee, tea, milk, or croissant. That's it.
You could order 4 things.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
All right, last part.
What did you learn in this last couple of weeks?
This is all I have. Horses can't vomit.
Okay. Okay.
I learned that horses can't vomit.
How did that come up?
I was reading a book about a woman who, long story short, she ended up with a horse farm. Okay. She overfed the horse. She thought he was hungry. He got colic.
That's an upset stomach, yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I knew that horses were very prone to like stomach issues.
Uh-huh.
I thought it was just because of bad routing. It is.
Bad routing.
Yeah. It is.
Bad internals.
I don't know why we built a creature that's 12 feet tall who can't vomit.
Yeah. When you told me this, I was like, to design a creature who will overeat, vociferously overeat.
Like, imagine a golden retriever who can't vomit.
Yeah.
If there's something I know about horses, it's that they love treats. They love snacks. They love things.
They do like snacks.
That's kind of their thing. So I could tell you more if you want to be really grossed out.
Not really, but...
Yeah. Anyways, when you think your horse is vomiting, it's not, and call for help immediately. Okay.
Call the vet.
Immediately. Call a large animal scientist for this job. And I don't know what else to tell you. It was in the book I read. It was
that's some very
kind of
specific
an important point
knowledge.
Of this book.
Will you ever use this knowledge you have now?
No, unless I suddenly come into a horse farm, which doesn't seem likely. But it didn't for her either, and she ended up with one. So let's just stick with what I know, which is that horses can't vomit.
Great.
I will now be returning to my farrier videos on TikTok.
Okay.
Which I love. What did you learn, Chelsea?
I learned about, have you heard of this guy? His name is John McFall. A British Paralympic sprinter surgeon ESA astronaut has just been cleared for space travel to the International Space Station after the conclusion of a feasibility study that was run to determine whether there would be any technical or medical limitations that would prevent him from space travel and going to the ISS. So he was cleared. I think he's the first person with a physical disability like this cleared for spaceflight.
No way.
His right leg was amputated above the knee when he was in a serious motorcycle wreck at age 19. And after that, he was just like, well, that's not going to stop me in any way. And yeah, cleared for spaceflight.
Good for him.
So that's what I learned about.
We'll have to follow him. I'm interested in that.
I would love to.
Okay. As always, a link of everything is included in our sources portion.
Show notes on our website, 16to1.com/archives.
Yep.
We can't fit everything, by the way. If you're listening on like Apple Podcasts, sometimes Google, whatever the new Google podcast app is, I can't even keep track of it. If you're listening on these other podcatchers, some of them strip out formatting, so we can't always share original links like how we want to. So if you are looking for resources, sources from our show, all of that, just go to our website. That's where you'll find everything.
In 2 weeks, we'll be back with a news episode. I'm sure nothing will have happened by then.
Nothing at all.
We'll see you then.
Talk to you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Hey listeners, thanks for supporting 16 to 1. We're your co-hosts. I'm Chelsea Adams.
And I'm Katie Day. Find our show notes, archives, and resources, sign up for our newsletter, or get in touch with us via the contact form at 16to1.com, all spelled out.
We are so grateful for our listener support. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the show and telling your friends or colleagues about it.
The show is edited and produced by you, Chelsea Adams, and you're also responsible for our show's music.
And you, Katie Day, serve as lead researcher and social media manager.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show. Last summer, we spent the better part of an afternoon with a guy who was a farrier who taught me a lot about horse feet and nothing about horse vomit.